So if you are even spending 20%, even just 20% of your time in more of an adult place, you're doing a lot better. If you're like 40%, you're like a rock star. There is no 100%, okay? I invented it and have been practicing it for many years, and I might be at 40%, really. So it's just kind of like, it's not this thing where you're like trying to be a perfect adult. It's not possible.
But when you get triggered, you're able to observe it and not.
Right, that's kind of the 40% is like, I'm not responding to the triggering in the environment. It happens in here and it's small. And then sometimes something will knock me on my ass. Something that I had not anticipated, something that didn't, like I wasn't doing what I should have been doing. I wasn't managing myself as well. My boundaries got diffused or kind of loose, and then something would happen and I'd have a huge kind of emotional reaction to it. The thing is with enough, because of this practice, like I'm still not pushing that out, but I can be surprised sometimes. I just went through an emotional kind of upheaval thing about a month ago, and it really caught me off guard. And it's a longer story. I was actually proud of myself that I was so open to that experience and trusted and all these other things, but it was a surprise. It wasn't as intense as earlier experiences like that. It was a heartbreak thing, so it wasn't as intense. So over time, all of it calms down. So the more corrections you do, the more you get rid of the gook. Because literally it's just like gook in there, and it just causes you to act weird and do weird stuff. Like all that I was trying to do was to give myself an option to not just react.
To make a choice.
Yeah, to have a choice. Because the child and teen states are reactive. You just bounce into them. And so if you have awareness that you've bounced into it, you don't have to act from that place. Especially if you apply correction and then you literally move out of that place. Like you literally move out of it mentally and emotionally, physically, spiritually. You move out of it when you apply the correction. So, I don't know how familiar you are with neuroplasticity, the concept that like your brain actually kind of repairs itself. So essentially like, here's your brain. Remember, I can't draw, so just let's get over it, okay? Like it's just gonna be what it's gonna be. Yeah, there you go. So there's your brain. And well, imagine some squiggles in there. So essentially your brain is floating in a potassium ion bath. It's floating literally in a saltwater bath. It's an electrical bath water, all right? And it's electric. You're making electricity in a chemical way. And so this electricity, this electrical impulse, literally goes around the brain in a clockwise fashion. And whatever you practice, basically, whatever you do more of, it makes a little groove in the brain, like a little divot. This is like how you learn. So essentially, like all those little squiggles, they're representative of like these microscopic little divots in the brain where the electricity goes, and then you have a reaction to something. Okay, so like you have a thought about something, makes a feeling or whatever, it actually makes a little divot in here. So let's do like a larger version of this. So let's say that you are a smoker, for example, just to use a real basic example. Let's say that you smoke cigarettes. So something happens, you have an emotional response, you have a reactive response to it, and then it's like, oh, I need to smoke a cigarette. I'm feeling tense or anxious. And so the first time that occurs and you smoke a cigarette, for example, to deal with something, you make a little divot in the literal brain tissue, in the actual brain tissue at a microscopic level, but it's almost not entirely microscopic. You have to be able you have to use the microscope to see it, but basically it makes this burn. It's like an electrical burn. It like burns a little groove in there. So the first time you smoke, it makes a little bitty one. Then the next time you smoke, it deepens that groove. And so basically every time you smoke a cigarette, every time you exercise too, every time you do anything that is basically the same behavior, you make a deeper groove. And so electricity follows the path of least resistance. So that's called a habit. So essentially, that's not necessarily a choice, it's a reaction. It's a learned behavior, it's a reaction. The same is true for emotional responses. Like whenever you have something occur that creates a big feeling in you, that is like a reactivity that makes a little groove in there. And then because this electricity is going around the brain and follows the path of least resistance, you're more likely to get mad when that thing occurs, or be triggered in a certain way when something mirrors something from your past. So you're not really having a choice. And so what I wanted was a way to have a choice. So essentially, let's say that like you're a smoker, you're smoking, and you're like, I'm gonna quit smoking. I don't know, so you get Chantix or whatever you do, and you're gonna quit smoking. Well, you have an impulse to wanna smoke, but for whatever reason, you're able to not choose to smoke that time, at that impulse. Basically, you make a new divot. What's really weird is that it's very near the other divot. It's in the same area. So basically, you make a non-smoking divot. Well, every time you choose to not smoke, you make that groove deeper. And then what's really amazing is because the body and the brain hates redundancy, over time, the one that you're not using fills in. Your body it's amazing. Your body actually fills it in and is like, we don't need that anymore, it's a redundant system. And so basically, you're no longer a smoker, you have this groove of non-smoking. So then you don't think about cigarettes anymore, eventually. I used to smoke, that's why I'm bringing this up. It's a very clear example. And I was like a hardcore smoker. I loved it. And I literally chain smoked from like 15 years old, because I had no supervision, was growing up in New York, and you could smoke cigarettes and all that. So 15 to like 24. And I was really into it. And then I got sick of it and basically just, decided I was done with that. Yes, please. I'm like, please bring it in. They need their coffee.
Our break.
We got to keep them calm, okay? It was, yes. Yeah, and actually that is a divot as well. I mean, it's another example. So basically, what that is just a habit. So what this gives you the opportunity to do is to step in and choose a new divot, choose a new behavior. And then over time, like we were talking about how you're living in the adult place more, over time, those actually fill in. Your emotional reactivity grooves, the impulsive behaviors you do. Whatever you're working on and applying this to, over time, that will fill in. It takes a while for that to fill in, though. It depends. But you don't need it to fill in all the way to then keep choosing your behavior. It's just really interesting how eventually you just stop doing that. Like, I literally never think about smoking. I mean, ever. I never want it. I never think about it. And it's because of this. I'm also 41, almost 42, and I quit smoking when I was 24, right? So there were a couple of years where I still would like cheat or whatever. But actually how I quit is I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just quit buying them, and then I would just bum them, and then I got embarrassed about that, and then eventually I just stopped. Hold on one second. Yeah, almost 40.
You're talking about smoking. I used to be a smoker
Right?
too,
So
but
there
I
were a
was
couple-
never addicted. It's the weirdest thing. Like I just.
But actually how I quit is I didn't make a big deal.
Thing and I just.
Yeah. Some people do not develop as much of an addiction as other people, especially chemically. It depends on the person. And people said to me, like, you must have never been addicted. And I'm like, well, I smoked like over 20 cigarettes a day. I don't know what you mean. But it was, for me too, just as an aside, it was really easy to quit. And I didn't understand that either, because other people were like, I can't believe you're not smoking, like I can't stop. And I'm like, I don't know, I just don't really want it anymore. But that's unusual. That's like an outlier experience. Yeah.
So a question I have, what are your
I can't believe you're not smoking.
kind of favorite high-level words to just describe? Is it more like a method, a framework?
Like how I describe what this is?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Basically, I just call it correction. So it's a correction method. It does provide you a framework to view your past experience and also frame your present, and then also what's going to happen in the future. So it is a lens through which to view life, and it is more of a practice.
Yeah.
And it does lead to, I don't want to be like, woo, but it does lead to like a certain level of enlightenment, frankly, especially over time. Especially after a year or so, people become very different spiritually because they're not as reactive. But I call it a practice, and I just call it correction.
Okay.
It does to view your frame, your present, and then all. So it is a lens. And it is more of a,
you know, this
like,
is
and
a
it does
lot-
lead to,
many years
but it
of
does lead
work.
to like a certain level of
There's a lot
employment
of-
over time.
A lot of time,
So
a lot of
people
effort,
become
a lot of
there because of,
research, and a lot
they're
of
not as
experience and all those things
but
are
I could
going
just call it
into
correction.
What we're seeing.
I mean, it
and
does
experiencing in
view your
3
frame, your
days.
present, and then
So
so it is a life.
I'm
and it
already
is more of a,
interested in the,
but it does lead to like a
you
sort
know,
of
the
eventually
more
over
kind of
time. Because of,
foundation.
they're not as real.
Digging deeper
but I
into, you know,
just
'cause
call
I'm
it,
sure
like
that-
how it was constructed and
Yeah,
what
I'm
goes
sure
into
that,
it.
you know, these are-
I mean,
these
it
are
does
s- these are able to
view
be
your frame, your
consumed and
present, and then
understood
all.
in 3 days.
Yes, and
And
it
it's
wasn't
designed
always.
that way.
It
Yeah.
is.
And
It's
I'm
highly
curious
designed.
about all the,
Well,
the
and that's,
structural
and I can talk with you more about
Yeah.
it, like outside of this environment, because I don't know that that's beneficial for everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot that's built in.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot that is just, I just knew what to do, frankly. Like one of the exercises you're going to do today, I literally thought of in 5 minutes walking on the beach.
able to be consumed and understood in 3 days.
And it's a crazy exercise. I mean, and what's interesting is, you know, the time is money thing. That 5-minute walk has made me like millions of dollars over time. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there's elements that it's just like, I just knew what to do. Then there's all the educational components and trainings. So basically, when I started really young. I went to graduate school when I was only like 23. And I sought out the most difficult placements and trainings. All the ones that nobody wanted were the ones that I wanted. So in other words, working with the lowest functioning people on the planet in the Tenderloin of San Francisco, I worked in that environment for 6 years. When you're working with people that are functioning at this unbelievably low level, you learn a tremendous amount about humans. And I was determined to learn the most I could about people. That work with these very low functioning people enabled me to then create something that I then strategically was like, I'm going to sell this to rich people. I mean, none of this is on accident. This is all planned. And I was like, I need to attach myself to the rich and then I'll become rich. Well, it works. If you are really pulling it off, you have to be able to do it. The proof is in the pudding. But I'm just saying it was all kind of like a plan that was a longitudinal plan. But it started with all of these rigorous trainings. I mean, I worked in methadone clinics. I worked in clinics in the Tenderloin with people. I mean, literally, the stories are insane. Some people have heard them, but like, it was not abnormal for someone to come into my office, which was a broom closet, and take off their jacket and a needle falls out of their arm. It's still in their arm. The first day of work, when I was a little kid, I feel like. I mean, no offense to anyone that's younger, but I was really young. And the first day of work, I go to this clinic. This first time I was in the Tenderloin I started at Larkin Street Youth Services, and I did like homeless youth, basically. And then I kind of graduated into more of like severely mentally ill people. And so they should be hospitalized, but they're not. Our system doesn't do that anymore since the Reagan era. They should all be in mental hospitals, but they're not. We don't do that. So basically, they're functioning in the community. My very first day of work, I went to this clinic and I had to get in the front door. And there is a man standing in the front door shooting up in his penis. Like just standing there, like so everyone can see. And this is young Brent. I was like, excuse me, move over. I have to go to work. I didn't even register to me of what I was really kind of entering into. And then that's like a normal story. I mean, I had people murder people, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, all of those experiences actually what informed this understanding of the dark side of stuff and the underbelly, basically, of human existence. It's a darker experience, frankly. It's not a light gig, life. About 60% of it's pain. Really. It's not a light experience. Today we're going to learn about the feelings and the gifts of the feelings. One of the gifts of pain is growth. This is a growth plane. You're here to grow. That's why it hurts a lot. I don't mean to be so nonchalant, but this is what I believe. And I know it's like, well, did you just say what do you think what life is about? And that's what I think. I think that is what life is to grow. For better or for worse. We're all here. This is what it seems to be, you know. Hopefully we won't stay here forever. Robert? That's why it hurts a lot. Sure.
Should it always be done sitting with your feet on the ground?
It's up to you. I mean, that's a classic pose, you know. like the meditation I do has all these rules. Like you're supposed to wake up at 4:45. You're supposed to use the bathroom. You're supposed to basically you can't eat or drink anything. You're supposed to sit in a certain position, blah, 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 do this mantra. I now wake up in bed still lying down and do it. And then I get up and go about my day. So I used to follow all these rules that were assigned by this Guruji, and then I was like, I don't want to do it this way anymore. And I have not noticed any differences. I've been laying in bed doing it for a decade. So I think it's really just whatever. Meditation is a fancy word for relaxation. That's all it really is. In bed, and then my day. All these rules that were assigned. That sounds great. I don't.
But here's the thing, I get so, when you said relaxation, I get so relaxed I fall asleep.
That's okay. If you fall asleep in a meditation, are you doing a timed meditation, like where you're supposed to do a certain number of minutes? Well, it really is.
Just like something like the money matrix.
Uh-huh. That sounds great. Okay, that's more of a visualization. That's a visualization. That's okay. If you follow doing a timed meditation,
I fall asleep for 3 minutes and then I wake up and I fall.
all it really is.
I'm like, okay, well, so something else.
No, it's good to fall asleep. Like, in mine, it's like a 20-minute thing. You're supposed to do it for 20 minutes. And if you fall asleep, it's this very restful sleep. Once you wake up, you're supposed to finish the 20 minutes. That's like in this mantra meditation I do. It's an Ayurvedic meditation. That's okay. If you follow doing a timed meditation, yes, and we're gonna do that tomorrow. Like very specifically. I mean, a correction is, when you talk about highly designed, it's highly designed. There's only 3 steps, but that's because they are so important. There's even a template that you guys have with word choices and different things, because that is basically the best correction that I could make or kind of create for people, and it was through trial and error. I mean, the very first clients were kind of like guinea pigs. Really. I mean, and I would tell them like, oh no, I know exactly what I'm doing, and like blah, 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 and like this is why it'll work and everything, and I was like, I mean, I was open with them about the fact that it was new. They knew that they were entering into something that was like not normal or that I had made up. But yeah, I mean, it's through trial and error of being like, this sentence here makes this work better. This word choice here. So there's only 3 steps to a correction. And I'll go ahead and, I mean, you reflect back the thoughts and feelings, you provide wisdom and historical data, and then you let them off the hook, essentially, or you dethrone the teen. Those are the steps. You're going to learn each one and what they're all about. You're going to have a little template. There will be no kind of like, what do I do? You're going to know exactly what to do, but those are the steps.
And then that's how you get underneath.
That's right. That's how you go to, that's what a correction provides, is you're not up here anymore. You're going down to basically the wound, the original wound. You're going down there and healing that, correcting that. It's like a redo. And so then basically the other things fall away. So let me show you something else really quick since we're talking about this. So basically like, so people have like problems, right? So those problems are, cluster of behaviors. So people are like, oh, I have depression, I have anxiety, maybe I have relational problems, maybe I'm suicidal, maybe I'm an addict. Whatever it is, I believe through working with it that these are simply symptoms. These are not the actual problem. The actual problem is here whenever your core issues get exacerbated. In other words, you bouncing into child and teen is actually what makes these symptoms. So what this is about is, if I can work down here at what's really causing it, then these actually don't present the same way. So essentially, when you apply correction, there's all this gook in here. There's all this like unexpressed feelings in here and emotional and mental blocks and stuff, and it kind of gums up the works. So that's what causes you to bounce into child and teen, which creates this stuff, okay? When you apply correction, you're getting rid of the gook that's at the root, that's in here. And so what happens is these like sticking points, if you will, like how it sticks in there, these start to break down. And so sometimes you will apply a correction, and whatever it is that you were working on is literally gone. That is not what I thought would ever happen. That is not the goal, that it just completely leaves, you just never do it again. But it does happen sometimes. And there's no way, I've never been able to predict with anyone that I've been working with, and I work very closely with people, I've never been able to predict when it'll go completely or when it'll just reduce maybe half, which is still a huge difference. That's the part you haven't experienced yet. That's still a huge difference. But sometimes what happens is you apply correction in the area of your life, and this just stops happening. And it's really weird. And the first client that I put through this was a woman. She was a nurse, or is a nurse. And she was my very first client in this model, or in this framework. And she lost like 35. She was pretty big. But she lost like 35 pounds. But rapidly. Like, I thought she had an eating disorder. I thought I had fucked her up. Like, I was like, you're really, like, she would come in every week, and I was like, you're like really a lot thinner. I was like, I think we need to, I was all like pathologizing it. And I was like, is everything okay? Like, I really think you're restricting your eating. And I was like, oh my God, I have like totally, what have I done? What am I gonna do? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you're like dramatically thinner. She's like, I know, isn't it amazing? And I was like, it is amazing, like I'm concerned. She's like, no, you don't understand. I just don't want to eat that much anymore. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I don't know what this really is or what you did. And this woman really thought I was like a god, because she was overweight her whole life. And she came to see me at 34. And she had been overweight since she was a child. And she's like, yeah, I don't know what you did or what this is, but I just don't want to eat as much, and I'm just not. And I was like, okay. And I really still didn't believe her. And then the next week she came in and said the same thing, and she seemed great all around. I started to really assess her a lot more intensely, and she was doing really well all around. And she's like, yeah, I stopped cheating on my husband. And I didn't even know that she had been doing that. She's like, yeah, I stopped doing that too. And I'm like, what? She's like, oh yeah, I was nervous. I didn't want to tell you about that. I was like hiding that from you, that I've been having an affair for like 2 years and all this stuff. And I was like, so tell me more about it. She's like, I don't want to do that anymore. And I'm like, okay. And then the next person was also a woman and a nurse, because she tried to send me every single person that she knew. And this other woman came, and she lost some weight too, but also just kind of stopped doing some things, but not as dramatically as that woman, as the first person. But certain areas of her life, stuff around her work, clarified for her, and she decided to not be a nurse anymore. So the thing is it created these very dramatic results in people, which freaked me out. It wasn't like, I was like, this is exactly what I planned to do. It was like, whoa, like, what is this? And so then I had to kind of work backwards a little bit and really understand like what I had made and why it was doing what it was doing. And I can explain all of like the why, but not at first. I didn't really understand everything. So anyway, if you make corrections, you're reducing what's at the root, and it's not like, it feels kind of magical, but it's not magic. What it is that what's causing these acting out behaviors is no longer there. And so they don't happen as much or as intensely, or sometimes they go away completely.
Would it be beneficial to talk about like why smoking served you in that context?
So the reason I was so into smoking was I was super traumatized, and basically what smoking is literally you're sucking the feeling back down that has come up. So you're literally like, get that back down there. And so all this stuff was always coming up for me because I had a like pretty intense trauma history, frankly. And so this stuff was going on all the time underneath the surface and would pop up, where I would be incredibly anxious and all kinds of things, depressed, all kinds of stuff was going on with me. And so I would smoke to repress the emotion. And that is what smoking is. It pushes feelings back down. You suck them back down. You suck them back in, basically. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah.
It's the same with eating a lot, right?
Same thing with eating. It's just a form of medication. So you're medicating all the time, it's normal. Humans medicate. It's not bad. It's just how much, what purpose is it serving? I mean, you're medicating with food, with water, everything is a form of medication. Back down. Is that what you're referring to?
What comes up for me is that almost any
it's the
issue
same
I've
with
ever
you.
seen is there's a secondary benefit to it.
You're medicating all Yes.
So
the time,
what
it's no
keeps popping up in my mind in this last few minutes is that it's a
Purpose
lesser
is it
of two
serving?
whenever
I mean-
we're exhibiting a unwanted, undesired behavior.
Mhm.
That is a lesser
comes
of
up for
two
me is,
evils. So when you
issue I've ever seen.
correct the original evil, the lesser evil is no longer necessary.
Yeah, that's another way to think of it. And what you're talking about is like called secondary gain.
Yeah.
And so every behavior serves a purpose, even if it's a darker or a negative behavior.
So when you solve the undesired behavior, like the original thing, then that secondary gain is no longer there.
It's no longer there. It literally, it kind of falls off, or it's reduced enough that you can step in. Because remember, that was the only goal, is that it's reduced enough that you could step in. That's all I was trying to do. It just ended up doing more stuff.
I've got an example that fits. So before working with Brent, I had a really bad
That is a
anxiety
lesser
problem.
of two evils.
Because when I would go out in a
It
social
literally-
situation, I was just like paralyzed with anxiety. So
That you
the
can
voice
step
in
in.
my head, like my teen is like, what are you scared of, pussy, whatever. And the only way to like blow out that.
It just ended up,
So when you
Like,
solve
shut up that voice that was calling me, like, take
undesired
that break from
behavior,
myself.
Mm-hmm.
was
that is a lesser
kind
of two
alcohol.
evils.
it literally, and it was a symptom medicating the fear he had around being seen, the social anxiety. And so if you take care of that, then all of a sudden you're not doing that thing. Like, and that can confuse, like most people know my work now, it's like kind of more public, but like people maybe would come and see me and they're like, I have this very specific thing I'm doing. Like I'm drinking too much, or I'm acting out sexually, or whatever it is. And what shocks them is I'm like, yeah, okay. And they're like, well, you should want to hear more about this, basically. And I'm like, I'm not concerned with what the behaviors are. And they're like, what? Sometimes they're offended. And I'm like, well, like, that's the way you're acting out. We're not going to attack that. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, no, you don't, like, let me explain this to you. There's something happening over here. Let me show you this matrix thing, blah, blah, blah. And so we go around over here because it doesn't work just to attack the symptom. You're not actually reducing the problem. You're treating a symptom. And that's not enough for me. And so I wanted to heal the root cause. But it can take the shame out of it too for people. Basically, I don't shame them for whatever they're doing. I'm like, oh no, you're acting out around something else. Let's not worry about you going to AA right now or worry about you doing all these things that you think you're supposed to do. Let's talk about your family of origin issues and let's learn how to correct what actually happened. And that's why over all of these years, the people that see me really do get better, which is also unusual. That's not normal. Usually you're just like talking about the symptom all the time and relapsing in the symptom. I'm not even talking about addiction. I'm saying whatever the symptom is, because it doesn't go deep enough. And I tried to push this into psychology, into the field of psychology. I was a well-respected therapist in San Francisco, and I even had some pull. It's a small community, by the way. San Francisco is a tiny place. It's a very powerful place, but very small. And people were just so offended, and because I was literally like, oh, everything you're doing is wrong. I know you're an MD, or I know that you're this, or I know you're 30 years older than me, or whatever, but this is all wrong. It should be focusing on this. And I was too teen-oriented. I was very young. You have to understand, I was really young. And I was a little too teeny to like really zhuzh it in, and basically it just continued to get rejected. And I was like, you know what, fuck this. I really was. I was like, I'm done with this crap. I'm not going to be a therapist anymore. People were like, what? You're not going to do that? You spent $100,000 on this stupid degree. You have all these, and I was like, no, I'm just going to do coaching. Because this is before coaching was a thing. And I was like, I'm just going to call myself a coach. And it's the same work, but I'm going to remove all this therapy stigma, and I'm sick of trying to make you guys understand. And so I just did it on my own and changed my name and doubled my income in 1 year, and all these other things occurred. And now those same people are like, when are you going to offer trainings at ITAP? Or when are you going to? And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So anyway, this was not a popular opinion. Yes. Trying to make you guys.
Something more to the neuroplasticity angle of eliminating your core issues.
Things occurred.
Because
And
there's there's no new habit formed yet, but yet you're still not going
So anyway.
into the old grooves.
The new habit is that you're attending to what's actually occurring. So the new habit is that you're attending to your child and teen. So the new habit is I know what I think, I know what I feel, and I know who it belongs to. And then I'm going to talk to that part of me. That is the new habit. It's the awareness. That's what creates that little divot. It's no longer, I'm not aware of what's occurring, and then I'm just going to act out in this behavior. Attending to your child, and I know what I
Still,
think.
At the early phases of that, this is not a challenge.
And I know who
this
it
is just
belongs
a
to. No. Are you
brainstorm
kidding? I love
item.
this. It's very interesting
I'm
to me.
very interested in, because I did EMDR stuff too, so it's like,
Yeah.
as soon as
It's
that's
occurring,
over,
and then I'm just going to.
and I don't know, like physically
You're
what
attending
happens,
to your
but
child
it does
and-
feel like that old giant divot is
And I know
just
who it belongs
not-
to. Part of, yeah.
That's
That
fascinating
is.
to me, like what
Mhm.
actually is happening in the brain.
And in
the
EMDR,
early
it's
stage.
the theory is the same within EMDR, but this process is it's like over time and gentler, and I prefer it basically because basically you are working with yourself, getting to know yourself, and developing this relationship with yourself. It's not this unseen thing that occurs and then you're just like, well, I don't know why or what happened. You're actually building a relationship with this child and teen. I'm not trying to make you crazy, like, oh, there's 3 of you. But the thing is this is a living, breathing thing. That little boy and that teenage boy are still in there. And the same for that little girl and that teenage girl are still in there. And so you learn how to develop a relationship with them, which is you developing a relationship with yourself that's based on witness and approval. And that's all that you really require. And this is just a way for you to be able to do that.
I love it. It's almost like whatever you deal with the core stuff, like a dent removal.
You learn how to develop a
Just from
relationship.
the-
And that's like
You
what,
know what I mean?
yeah.
I'm just trying to
relationship with
I'm
yourself.
fascinated, like,
Brain Botox.
physically what happens to the
And I
brain.
am too, and I'm not an expert in neuroplasticity, let's be clear. But the thing is I do understand it, and it is fascinating. You know,
It's like the divot doesn't exist anymore.
it gets filled in over time, but it is like it's not there.
That's weird, yeah.
And but it is there, but it's because you're able to choose this new one. And EMDR is actually somewhat similar in that way, but it's in no way actually the same process. You know what I mean? Like, it's similar in that it does create this ability to make a different choice.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting. It's weird.
I'm sure we're gonna jump into it, so again, I don't wanna jump the gun, but,
one.
I read, it reminds me a little bit of a book I read 2 or 3 years ago.
In no way
a
actually this.
psychiatrist, psychologist who was MD, who was writing some stuff around trauma.
Mm.
And he had talked about how with his patients, one thing that he would do after a certain
Not
amount
there.
of core work and preparation was he would actually have, and he had much of the similar types of thinking, you know, that dealing with these core issues is fundamentally important, that a lot of these things are symptoms. And I'm just curious if you're even familiar with I can't remember the guy's name, but it sounds a little similar, and I'd be interested to hear your kind of perspective on this take or this idea.
Not there.
Where he would actually have, in a session, a couple of actors that would end up being abusive mother and
It's called drama.
cheating girlfriend.
It's called drama therapy.
Okay, and he would have the subject voice what the inner child couldn't voice 10
Not
years
there.
ago.
Mhm.
And, you know, kind of have that process happen, and he seemed to get a lot of interesting and sometimes very powerful.
And you would get
results.
some movement from that for sure, because it's
Yeah.
making it more real and tangible. So the difference is that in this, you're working with yourself, but it also is about your parents.
Mhm.
And so I do this process in private work that I call chair work, where you do bring in your parents into like an empty chair. It's not a Gestalt technique, but there's influence of Gestalt and other people in there. And essentially, like, you have your parents over here, and then you talk to them and express the emotions and all the stuff that happened that was like fucked up, and you talk to them about it. But I'm facilitating that with you, and then you basically suck up the feelings that come up, the blocks, and we blow them out at the parents.
Yeah.
So that's kind of similar in that way.
Okay.
But what he's doing is called drama therapy, and it makes things more real. In other words, it creates increased reactivity in the patient. Remember, those are called patients. I used to call people patients too, now they're clients. But you're creating a reactivity that you cannot necessarily mimic in his ability to create that reactivity. I can do that with someone individually
Right.
and make them reactive enough
Yeah.
that then they can do what he's doing with these actors and other things. And it's a bit of a different process, but just to kind of give you a parallel as to what's happening. And actually, the process you're in over this next couple of days, it exacerbates you. I mean, it's like you start having like connections, and you start thinking about things, and you're integrating the material, but it also exacerbates the blocks that you have. And that's why we teach you correction, because then it would be cruel to exacerbate you and then be like, have a nice life. But that's literally what I believe traditional psychology and therapeutic practices do. And that's why I don't do them anymore. And so basically that was one of the core tenets of why I made something new as well, is I didn't like the dependency that my relationships created with the client. I was like, I'm actually actively creating dependent relationships with people where they're dependent on me, and that's making me feel better about myself. And I was like, whoa, that's fucked up. Like, I had this very opposite kind of reaction where I was like, I'm getting off to this dependency. Oh my God, I have some issues over here. Like, it was that kind of experience. And so I cleaned that up for myself. And then I was like, wait, this is what the whole field is predicated on.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why would you, if it works, why are you seeing someone for 25 years? And why are you buying them another Mercedes and another kid to school or all these things? And I'm like, this is a dependent process. And my whole deal was that I was codependent. I was a raging codependent. And so basically, once I kind of got some healing from that, I was like, I can't knowingly participate in a process that creates dependency. What am I going to do? I have $80,000 worth of student loan debt, and I like all these other things, but I morally, ethically could not continue. And so I had to figure something else out, and I did. Okay, yes.
What do you think of AA?
Think of AA?
Yeah.
I think AA can provide a lot of what I call scaffolding. So it's largely teen-driven, but it does provide a sense of community for people and a sense of support, and in that way it's a wonderful thing. AA is not and never was intended to be a way to heal from addiction. That's not actually how Bill writing that book, that's not exactly what it was about.
What do you think it's about?
It's about that was a way to come together as a group and white knuckle it together.
Right.
And that's why it's mainly cross addiction is what occurs in those groups. So essentially, they're all addicted to nicotine and coffee.
What? Well, like, I've had my own, obviously I've shared my experience.
Exactly what
with,
it was
like,
about.
addiction.
Yeah.
And, like, I needed to get sober, and I was
Way
trying to get sober, and I
to
couldn't.
come-
So I had friends in AA. I started going to AA, and it was working.
Yeah, it's
But,
super
like,
helpful at
but
first.
like I said, I found it's like I have
Mainly
issues,
cross addiction is what I-
logically understanding. It's like, okay, but I can do this,
Essentially,
I can drink as much
they're all-
coffee and smoke as many cigarettes as I can. And I'm doing it. I'm like drinking 5 cups of coffee in an hour and like chain smoking cigarettes.
what it
Like,
was
this
about.
is what I'm doing now.
Right. And
it's
so
healthy,
way
but then
to
it's like
come-
I had taken some heat in AA from a sponsor. I did a peyote ceremony.
Uh-huh.
I got in trouble for that. Even
Oh,
though I
I'm
felt
sure. Mainly
that
cross addiction
I was
is what I-
connecting to my higher power, which was some of the stuff that I
Essentially,
was learning in AA,
they're
I
all-
was applying. So it's like there's been.
And that's the thing is there are elements of it that are helpful, but it's not like a magic bullet thing. So I mean, I think that can be great for people, but I don't think that it's enough because it doesn't go deep enough. It's about managing the addiction over here through coffee and cigarettes. I mean, like at treatment centers, like we have to remember I have especially an addiction. And so I would go to these treatment centers and be like, yeah, you're not allowed to smoke anymore. And they were like, you can't do that. I mean, these are the administrators. They're like, you can't do that. I was like, well, actually, I can do that. I was hired by the hospital, and you work for me right now. But they often would be like, you don't understand, you can't. I'm like, no, I do understand. I was like, but we're going to start working in a different way here. And so then I would train them to be able to do stuff similar to this, and then they weren't allowed to smoke. But then they would start to heal. And so AA is great in that it's very helpful. But it is not a way to heal, in my opinion. You have to go deeper.
Well, then like it is like there's certain things that I I would see, or like logically, like, okay, if I could have a spiritual experience and not drink again, couldn't I have a spiritual experience and drink normally again?
Well, and that's, that is kind of like your own relationship to where you are as far as your ability to impact and control the addictive quality.
Right.
So in other words, people don't typically come see me for addiction anymore. That's not really what I'm doing all the time. But I never was like, you can't drink when people would come see me. I was always like, you need to look at why you're doing it. Is it working for you? Is it not? And then learn how to work with yourself at a deeper level. And then those people would naturally stop drinking as much. But that's very unusual. It's not normal. It's not normalized. That's just what people were doing with me. So AA can be great, but it's not going to do a bunch of stuff that it's not meant to do. Look at why you're doing it. Is it working?
I think any of those things are horrible because it relies on one core lie, is that you are an addict. And it's a self-image that it traps you into
Very
this
unusual.
self-prophecy
It's not.
that you are defective, you are broken. That is your core identity. I don't think that's productive.
There can be an identity issue around that, like, where it's like, I am an addict. I think people that are struggling with addiction, that it is real for them, that they are actually in an addictive process. But
I am addicted is different than I am an addict.
yeah, and what that's about is that it's in the AA model, and basically it's like you have to surrender to the fact that you have a problem. And that's something that people are reticent to do when they enter into AA, even when they go there.
Admit you were powerless.
Yeah, it's this whole like, there's a lot of victim stuff going on in it, and that's because there's a lot of victim stuff in addiction. Addiction is ultimate boundary failure. That's actually all it is. Your child is completely taken over.
It's child?
The child is the one that's being medicated, but the child and teen are both active, and basically the teen is like pouring liquor in the child's mouth.
Okay.
And so you work with the teen first, and then you work with the child. But it's literally that's what's happening. It's like, shh, be quiet, zip it. So if you think about it that way, that you have like a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old drugging a 4-year-old, that's a very powerful image, and it is actually what's occurring. And so you don't want to be, the adult knows not to pour liquor in a 4-year-old's mouth, right? But the teen is the one managing that child, the wounds, the issues. So if you even have that image, it changes your whole perception of like what's actually occurring, which is a very different thing than I'm an addict and I'm a victim of my addiction. I agree. But it is something that's built into kind of the rhetoric of addiction. I did not know that I was going to be giving a lecture on addiction today. We should probably move into other things. But is there anybody else that has anything they want to bring up? Or any question about yesterday? You and then you, victim of my addiction.
I was thinking a lot about how this can impact
And that's
how I
built
relate to others.
into-
Like, in other words, if I
Yeah.
see someone else and they're
Today.
a child acting out, or their teen acting out, like the same thing kind of applies there. I could react to that, and that would be my child, my teen reacting to them there.
Yes,
Same
addict, I'm a
practice,
victim
like
of my
just
addiction.
seeing them more as a functional adult, and then kind of relating to them in that way instead of relating to them as a child.
And
Always keep it going.
And also, notice that they are in a child or teen place, and how would you relate to a child or a teen? So someone is obviously very closed to something. You're talking to them and they're like, "Mer, mer, mer," being all closed.
Yeah.
Well, why would you keep talking? But everybody does. Because whenever someone's in a teen place, it elicits your teen or your child. Okay, and so basically people are like all closed and they're having these arguments, and it doesn't make any sense. You're not going to get anywhere. They're not open to you. Why are you wasting your breath? And it's okay to say, when I hear you say this, what I think is that, you're not really open to the discussion. So I'm going to shut up. And then you just turn around and walk away. In other words, you start being a real person. You start being relational. And you're like, this is this thing, and I think, nah, I'm just
So
not
all
good.
political discourse.
Yep. I don't engage in political discourse.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? It's the most hot button, getting eyes on ads for products thing out there right now. And it's a trend, and it'll go away. They always do. But that one is especially annoying to me. But it's true, the more you working with your own kids, you're creating empathy for yourself. well, you can only do with others what you can do with yourself. Anything other than that is a lie. Like people are like, oh, I love you more than I love me. Nope. I'm more respectful of you than of myself. Nope. This is the primary relationship. I was talking with you about this last night. This is the primary relationship. So whatever you're doing here is how you're going to do it outside of you. You may think you're doing it differently. You're not. If you could observe yourself, you would notice that.
Can you talk about that just a little bit more? Just to say, I know we're
Sure.
going to move.
No, but I mean, I'm trying to think of what else to say about it, basically. Like, essentially, you're having a relationship with yourself.
Right.
And if you're a big teen with yourself,
Yeah.
you're going to be a big teen with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever's going on.
Yeah.
How we act with ourselves, the context changes, and so we use different rules. Like at work, we're not going to be maybe as volatile, but we're still having that go on. I mean, you can't get away from yourself.
Yeah.
We all try to. It's also what does move people into addiction, addictive behaviors. We're trying to escape from the realities of what's happening in here. So as you work with yourself, you're witnessing and approving your kids, which that's you. It's through the lens of your kids. And it's designed that way because you can tell people, I could tell people, well, you know you're supposed to be taking better care of yourself. You should go do this. And they're like, yeah, I know. But I'm not doing that. And it's like, well, but there has to be a way. As soon as I posited it outside of the person and was like, you have this child, this little boy or girl that needs you, and you have this teen that needs you, all of a sudden they're like willing to do stuff. And it's because it's outside of you. But it's just like, it's positing it outside. It's really inside. Does that make sense, though?
Yeah,
you
it makes
have
sense.
this
I mean, to
child
me,
with
it
you, and you
opens
have
up a
this
lot of
teen
really
that.
interesting questions centering around, couples and children.
So do you have any specific? Do you know any specific question? Do you have a specific question about couples and children, or?
No, it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, many.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
so
let
yeah,
it kick around.
Yeah, to me, it opens up a lot of.
So Whitfield and I know each other, and I lived in judgment.
So do you
like,
have any
I was always
specific
judging
question? Do
everybody
you have a
else,
specific?
Based on kind of how my family got
No,
it, where it's just constant criticism, and that's how the
Let it kick around.
Yeah.
But because I was judging everybody else all the time, I was also judging myself all the time. Because that's just how, I was always.
Well, and
that's how I
actually you were judging yourself all the time, and therefore you judged everybody else all the time.
Yeah,
It started with you,
right.
and then we do that to other people, And I was like, you guys have no idea. I was such a judgmental bitch. It was unbelievable how snotty I was, and oh my God. I look back and I have so much, it's healthy shame, but I'm like, oh God, the things I said and did. I remember one time I went to a Thanksgiving dinner at a boyfriend's family's house, and I went on this tirade about organic food and how that is the only thing that I eat, and blah, 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 blah. Never even occurring to me that that wasn't an organic turkey or whatever. And I'll never forget, because these people were like, they were late 60s Jews in San Francisco. And I grew up in a Jewish home. My stepfather's Jewish. And so they were like, he was like, this is at the tape. He's like, well, you're not eating organic right now. Does it taste like shit to you? And I literally just was like, I mean, I was 25, but I was like, oh my God. Like, there's no recovery from that. I might as well have pissed on the table like you pissed on the floor. And these were also very rich people, and it was just the most everything was just fucked after that. Like, I was like, I just basically like ran away. But that's just like one example of like just crazy, egregious, boundaryless garbage that my teen was doing everywhere. I mean, I'll really quick, like when I first started doing this work and was really getting into it and making this for myself, I went to New York to visit my family. My parents had still lived in New York at this time. And so I ran into a friend from college, like randomly, which New York's weird. You can run into people, which doesn't really make sense because you'll never see the person right there ever again, but you'll run into your friend. So I ran into someone, and I was like 29 or 30, and this woman, Andrea, and she was like, oh, it's good to see you and stuff, and we started talking, and she's like, you're really different. And I was like, what? She was like, you're like being nice. And she was like freaked out. Like she was like, what? what the fuck? I mean, she really, and she's super New York. She was like, what the is going on with you? And I was like, I'm just like a lot better. I was like, I've done a lot. I hadn't talked to her for years, you know, and I'm like, well, things have changed a lot and blah, blah. And she was like, I just don't understand. She's like, you're nice. And I was like, well, was I really? She was like, yeah. She was like, you were terrible. And I was like, but you were my friend in college. And I was really very popular in college. I was like student body president, like all this stuff. And she's like, no, you don't understand. Everyone was afraid of you. But that like really, like, I was like, oh my God. And I just didn't really even have the awareness. She's like, no, we were all friends with you because we were afraid of you. And she's like, do you remember how you like totally destroyed this? And she started giving these examples of people that I had like kind of decimated with my wit and intelligence and other things, and I would just destroy people like that. That was interesting. That was amazing. I'm glad that's on film. I want a copy of that. So, but I really would. It was bad. So anyway, lots of change. And then did you have something that you were people like that? That was interesting. Whoa.
Kind of come to mind is that as you know, people who have especially painful childhood, adolescence, as you move into adulthood and you start to get more of the traffic.
So anyway.
I've always kind of like disowned the former self.
Destroy
right?
people.
So,
Like.
but our
Whoa.
always with us. We're a triad.
Yeah.
Like a trinity of.
That's how I think of it.
So it kind of is like perhaps
So anyway.
in some ways I'm thinking of more like a shamanic kind of like the whole soul retrieval that they
Destroy people. I'm familiar.
When we're broken, there's a piece of us that breaks off, and in the diagram that you were showing, when we're like ready to
So anyway.
heal the wound, we're also reintegrating so that we can
Destroy
more
people.
successfully
Like.
accepting all three parts of ourselves,
Yep.
knowing that we are going to be triggered, but if we can, heal the wound, hopefully with everything we learn, function more as the functional adult.
Which is an integration of all three parts.
Right, but then it made me realize that I had to accept that girl and the little kid and not try to be like, okay, fuck off, that's me.
Not continue to shame her the way that you were shamed.
Right.
And that's what the teen does, is just kind of picks up the behaviors of the parent. It's modeled. And so then you have to move, you learn how to reduce your shame, essentially, through working.
I've always felt like when I was
Behaviors of the parent, it's modeled.
I'm talking about precociousness and things like that. It wasn't even people trying to dull my shine, like it was shining too bright.
Behaviors of the parent, it's modeled. Yeah, but that is shaming. That's not what, that's saying like you're not supposed to be who you are.
Right.
What you're doing is unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
But it's not what you're doing, it's you are unacceptable. And that's the message that comes across.
Yeah.
And that that creates this woundedness, and then we carry that with us. But you're absolutely right that this process is, you can view it in whatever lens you want. There are shamanic elements of what I do, frankly. And so you are reclaiming and reintegrating, and then you become more whole, and then you can do what you're supposed to do. Like, then you can express what you're supposed to express. That's actually what you're here to do. You are here to express who you are. That's it. That's why you're here on the planet, is to do that. The problem is that we're fragmented, covered up with gook. Things get pushed out of the way, and you get damaged, basically. But I think that's what's supposed to happen, or it wouldn't be. It's supposed to happen because it happens. Apparently, it's something with the path of being here, where things are supposed to get jacked up, and then I believe you're supposed to learn how to go through the process of fixing that and healing that, and then move forward. Why would everybody get all jacked up if it wasn't that way? It is what it is. But I really appreciate what you're saying. It's a different kind of way to talk about it or think about it, and I strongly relate to what you're saying. about integration and also reclamation of the soul is essentially what you're doing. I just don't sit in a jungle or take you into a hole in the ground and you give me some food. You know, I live in West LA, I need money. It's a different thing. But it's the same thing.
How do I stop? How and why do I stop?
About
hitting my
integration
child?
and it's normal at first whenever you learn about them.
Obviously, like, we're trying to move away from them.
I live in West
so
LA.
implicit is bad.
I need you to listen whenever you ask me a question.
Yeah, sure, you're gonna explain the question a bit more, but
I don't need the explanation, okay? So the thing is like whenever you first learn about them, there's a tendency to be mad at them or to like hate them. And it's normal. It's your starting point, Alex. It's just where you're starting from. And I promise you that if you do corrections with those kids and you do some corrections around it, it'll change. It's normal. The tendency to be mad at them.
deal with the hatred as a predicament to doing corrections?
No, it's built in. It's a part of how you write a correction. You're going to go through a process of moving away from that even in the first one that you write. It's a great question. Learn about them. There's a tendency to be mad at them.
Flaring up very strongly right now.
Yeah,
Two,
I
I've
know.
done
It's
so
a part of
much
how
work
you
on
write a
person in a child already, correcting it, and once the feelings get strong enough,
It's a great
I feel
question.
my child on my team, I always resort back to that one. I feel
Yeah, and it's because it's just a limit to what you've done so far and how it's worked for you and not worked for you. But what's built in is that you move through that, kind of not liking them, and then you learn how to care for them. So it is a process, it's built in, but I appreciate that it's very triggering at this moment. And you're just really getting a lot of awareness. You're right on kind of a core thing, which is like, you know, not liking those parts of yourself or not liking yourself. That's what's happening when you look at the kids. And so you're just right on it. That's a good level of awareness to have on the morning of day 2. And so you're going to work through that. But I appreciate how uncomfortable it is. And the thought of like, well, fuck, like now I know this, what am I going to do? But I'm going to show you what to do. So hang in there. You're doing good. Just hang in there, okay?